to know about First Christian, because they said they wanted the history, so I've got the history of it. And one of my favorite quotations is from a lady named Margaret Vissing, and she said, "Whereas the house of God today is no longer material, but spiritual, the material is still a very real symbol of the spiritual." Elio Saarinen was asked to build a church which would interpret the spirit of Christ and of the gospel, and which would promote these ideals and assure their perpetuation among us. Saarinen said it was essential to establish a true relationship between the people themselves and the design of the church. He was designing not a mere church, but a church expressing the religious aims of the congregation. I'd like to take you back in the history of First Christian Church and what moved the congregation and elders to choose Elio Saarinen to build this incredible building. FCC can trace its roots back to 1823. Benjamin Irwin donated land from his farm for a meeting house which was called New Hope Baptized Church. In 1841, the members residing in Columbus obtained a frame church, and the congregation alternated between the New Hope Church and the Frame Church until 1855, when the Columbus people obtained a brick church. They organized themselves into the Christian Congregation of Columbus. And in the back wall, in the back eastern wall, is a cornerstone of the brick building they used called the Christian Chapel. It had been located near the corner of Washington and Jackson Street, where the drive-through section of Irwin Union Bank had been, which is now part of Cummins. In 1879, the congregation dedicated a new building and took a new name, Tabernacle Christian Church. Tabernacle Christian Church was located on Mechanic Street, which is now Lafayette, on property which is today part of the Cleo Rogers Memorial Library. Tabernacle Christian Church was considered to be one of the most handsome churches in southern Indiana and was built at a cost of $423,000. From 1873 to 1898, when Z.T. Sweeney was the minister, the congregation grew from 300 to over 1,000. In the back of the sanctuary, also on the east wall, is a bronze plaque commemorating his service. In 1930, T.K. Smith was called by the congregation and served the longest tenure of any of the ministers, 36 years. Also a plaque back there to him. During this time, the church needed another building to accommodate the growing congregation and the various activities of the church. Plans for something better had begun almost concurrently with the hiring of T.K. Smith. In 1937, brother and sister William G. Irwin and Lenny Irwin Sweeney had bought or traded for a block of land known as Railroad Square from the Pennsylvania Railroad. The Sweeneys presented the site to the congregation for a new church. Discussions were held concerning the style of church that should be built. Gothic architecture was considered, since that's what Tabernacle was, but it was not suited to the idea of incorporating the church's belief into the building, and that's what they desired. Nettie Sweeney Miller, wife of Hugh Thomas Miller, daughter of Lenny Sweeney, and mother of J.I. Miller, wanted a New England-style meeting house. When modern architecture was considered, some were alarmed. And you have to remember that Columbus was a town of less than 12,000 people, mostly agricultural and industry at the time. Nettie decided to take a trip east to visit the most renowned architects of the day and ask their opinions. And all the ones she talked to said that the church should be modern. The first architect hired was E.B. Gilchrist of Philadelphia. He worked for a period of time, somewhere between 1 and 2 years, on a plan, but he had a nervous breakdown and had to abandon the project. There's a story told by Elsie Irwin Sweeney that a lady in Nettie Miller's Sunday school class asked how things were going with the church and was told that they needed to find a new architect. The lady asked if they had thought of Mr. Booth's architect. Mr. Booth was a Detroit, Michigan newspaper publisher who had hired the Finnish architect Elio Saarinen to design the campus of the Cranbrook Educational Community of Art in 1932. An appointment was made, and Nettie and her husband Hugh went to meet with Saarinen. He was a very modest, unassuming man, according to Elsie. When asked if he had ever built a church, he replied he had in Lithuania. When he said he had not built a church in America because they were too theatrical, and that was not his idea of religion. She said that was not what they wanted. The type of church she wanted, they said, our town is small, and there are all sorts of conditions of men. And although they would like it to be beautiful, they do not want the first question asked, how much did it cost? We want the poorest in town to feel at home and able to worship God in these surroundings, to be reverential enough that the smallest boy would know it is the house of God and would keep still, and that it be as timeless as the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. After this meeting, Mr. Saarinen told Nettie to go home and tell the search committee he would build the church. He was quoted as saying the church would be simply designed church for a simple people. The elders of the church and the building committee wrote to Mr. Saarinen and his son Arrow and gave a description of the physical needs of the building and said they would be very disappointed if our new church turns out to be no more than a building which will house large numbers and accommodate a variety of activities. They continued, we attach much importance to our effort to preach and practice primitive Christianity and nothing else. There are a few elements in our beliefs which we would like to have emphasized in the church. Because of the gospel of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection lies at the heart of our faith, we would like to have it illustrated in some way in the architecture of the church. The church should be built to last a long time. As there is permanence in our faith, so there should be permanence in our church house. Great buildings dominate and influence the lives of all who live near them. We want our labor in the form of this building to continue to influence the lives of our children and of theirs. Now you see why we want our new church and what sort of a church we want you to build. And the architects replied. Their plan would be to divide the church into 4 major features. The east wing would be the church proper, the chapel, and the auditorium. The west wing would be one portion of the Bible school. The connecting bridge would have upstairs the remaining portion of the Bible school, the offices on the main floors, and the lower level formed in an open loggia-like feature. And the 4th would be the tower. Saarinen said dividing into this manner would give a satisfactory balance of mass and a lively yet restful skyline. The question was asked of Saarinen if his design was particularly appropriate to our church. His reply was that as a variety of theological traditions has been united into one by going back into the fundamental of Christian faith and has emerged as a brotherhood of simple outer form and rich inner life, he would compare the development of the church with that of the new architectural thought. Freed from traditional styles, building upon the fundamental principles of architecture, as our church has been based on the fundamentals of Christianity. So our form of religion and the design of the church are spiritually related to one another. Looking at the building specifics, the ground was broken in August of 1940 and the structure completed in early May 1942. There was no solicitation of funds at the dedication, which was normal because everything was paid in full, $750,000, with a congregation of 1,500. There had been a 3-year fundraising campaign called The Church is Our People. And as my husband's grandparents told me, the members were expected to give generously as possible with no lessening of their tithes or offerings. Although the Irwins, Sweeneys, Millers, and Reeves were very generous, the elders wanted all the members of the church to feel ownership of the church. A great deal of the contributions from these well-to-do members went into specialized funds. The Time magazine called the church the costliest modern church in the world, planned by Europe's most famous architect and his son. FCC was the first contemporary building in Columbus, and the first building in Columbus was a steel frame. Its concept was of a tall building woven into a harmonious whole with interlocking pieces flowing from the ground to the sky. The lines are straightforward and plain, some say severe. The church is considered modern, but the inspiration is primitive Italian. Saarinen, along with Charles Eames, head of the Industrial Design Department at Cranbrook in 1940, designed all the furniture in the church. Carl Milles, a Swedish sculptor at Cranbrook, was to design a bronze statue for the ledge in the front of the church, but with the war effort, no bronze was available and the statue was never completed. The lights were designed by Eero Saarinen and were reminiscent of first-century oil lamps. The large cross above the baptistry is the only symbolic element originally designed as part of the church. The tapestry on the west side of the chancel, the only item with color other than the gray and white of the walls and the brown of the leather seat cushions. It's probably the largest ecclesiastical tapestry to be woven in the United States, at least at that time. It's 10 feet by 35 feet. It was designed by Saarinen and his wife and woven by the Finnish weavers at Cranbrook and portrays the Sermon on the Mount. The angled wall on the east side of the church covers the pipes of the Aeoli Skinner organ with 4,695 pipes from 32 feet long to 3/4 of an inch. Has 81 sets of pipes or 81 different sounds. 1/4 of the pipes are in the ceiling above the baptistry. The organ was considered by the American Guild of Organists as one of the great instruments of the nation. Luckily, it was ordered in 1938 and signed for before the metal restrictions were enacted as a result of World War II. It did take an act of Congress to have it installed. The cost was $38,000 and was paid for by Mrs. Miller. I mention these elements because Elio Saarinen was one of the first contemporary architects to use sculpture and art as part of the building. The material used in the building were all easily available: brick, limestone, bleached white oak, concrete, and leather, designed to last and wear well without flash. In 1957, the congregation changed the name from Tabernacle Christian Church to First Christian Church. In 1958, the youth center across 4th Street on the south side was completed and dedicated. McGuire and Shook, Compton, Rickey, and Associates prepared the plans. The center had over 18,000 square feet of floor space and originally included a game room, skating rink, scout room, and bowling alleys on the lower level, with a gymnasium, locker room, and administrative offices on the upper. In 2000, Nolan Bingham designed a new 3-story addition to the south of the existing building. Susan Saarinen, Elio's granddaughter and a landscape designer, seemed satisfied that the plans would complement the existing building. She was quoted as saying that her grandfather believed that the environment in which we live affects us. Our church is not just a building. We are surrounded with all the vertical imagery showing our connection with God, but we are also surrounded with the horizontal imagery showing our connection with other people. First Christian Church has always tried to be a beacon for God, but many of the activities of this congregation have in the past and do presently involve the community. We want to be good neighbors and have always opened our doors not just to our own congregation, but to those around us. We value biblical authority, kingdom growth, faithful stewardship, every person, and community impact. Over the years, we have hosted numerous community groups, including, but not limited to, Columbus Philharmonic, the Heritage Fund, the Brown Scholarship Awards, First Call for Help, Newcomers Club, the Police Athletic League Basketball, AAU Basketball, Men's, Youth, and Children Basketball Leagues, Toyota Volleyball Tournament, competitive and recreational volleyball leagues, golf lessons, Senior Center Volleyball, aerobic classes, China painters, Moms in Touch, piano recitals, Alliance for the Mentally Ill, CHAD of Bartholomew County, Creative Memories, Family Services of Bartholomew County, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, National Family Week, grief support groups, quilt shows, a quilting group, street festivals and art fairs, monthly blood drives through the American Red Cross, monthly benevolent dinners, helping hands, hot meals, Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners for anyone in the community. The women's Bible studies also perform a service project every semester. We participate in construction. We have a yearly coat drive and a blanket drive, and we support Clarity, My Best for You, and Love Chapel with money and volunteers. We participate with the Parks and Recreation Department in the City of Columbus with Green Up. We have given community gifts of First Christmas and the First Fourth, celebrating the 4th of July and our freedoms. Organizations such as Hope Elementary, Northside Middle School, First Presbyterian, Community Church of Columbus, Midway Christian Academy, Garden City Church of Christ, East Columbus Christian Church, St. Peter's Lutheran Church, and others have used our facilities for special events. We have a preschool open to anyone in the community. 87% of the children are not from First Christian families. We have a group called Refresh to help mothers of preschoolers meet each other. We have a mentoring program for young married women. We have hosted seminars on how to handle finance and seminars for seniors concerning finance and planning for the retirement years, and the list goes on. Every year we have hundreds of people visiting Columbus to see our amazing art and architecture. FCC for 75 years has been at the top of the list of things to be seen. A building built with foresight and elegance and used and maintained with love. It is reverential, and it is timeless as the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. As I quoted earlier, great buildings dominate and influence the lives of all who live near them. We hope the people of Columbus have all experienced a positive influence, both because of our magnificent building and also because of the people who have been blessed to call it home. There is so much to this church, far more than can be expressed in such a limited time, and the appreciation for this building and its family can only grow over time. And some of you probably wish I talked more about the symbolism. That's not what they asked me to do, but I will do a tour after everything is over if you want to know about the symbolism and why certain things were done the way they were.